Hello, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful book by MJ Demarco, an entrepreneur by himself. The name of the book is The Millionaire Fastlane. And first of all, I want to warn you to not get distracted by the title. He's not talking about some get rich quick scheme or make money fast or anything like that, even though he does talk about how to create wealth faster compared to the normal ways that we know. It's not at all a get rich quick scheme. It's actually right on the contrary and on the exact opposite end of the spectrum. He talks about how to build wealth in the right way, in a systematic way. And I'm really excited to talk about this book because it really rhymes with the way I think about life in general and about about building wealth in general as well. So, having said that, let's get right into the book. What MJ talks about in this book is first he kind of demystifies the myths that we all have, which is one of those is the idea that you have to get rich slowly, which is go get a job and take the job, do the job for the next 40 years, hope that you will keep a job in one company or another, and then at the end of the 40 years, you will have your golden years, you will retire at the age of 65, and you'll have all this money saved up in the bank. But as we know, it's a deception because we've seen the market crash happen at all these odd times, and you never know when it's coming. And if you bank your whole life on the Wall Street and a steady job, then you are in for a very rude awakening. And that's MJ's um, contention here, that we should all stop trying to get rich slow, which is the old way of doing things. Having said that, what MJ talks about is wealth overall. It's not an event but a process. It's not a road you take, but it's a road trip. And to get delve deep into it, it's a brilliant concept. What MJ really likes to talk about is the idea of the road trip to wealth and then the roadmaps. And um, what's one of the key concepts in this book, one of the biggest concepts in this book, is the idea that millionaires are not forged by events. They're forged by processes, by following process, by following the step-by-step method, by continuing to follow with discipline, by following the things that you need to do. There's this great problem in society where everyone believes that wealth is created by events. Something like you suddenly become rich. You have this great idea and you suddenly become rich, or you strike big on a lottery and you become rich, or you spend some time investing in stock market and suddenly you become rich. If only I had invested in that stock, or if only I had invested in gold at the time, I would have become rich. All of these are event based thinking. They are not process based thinkings. But what MJ talks about is that without process there are no events. Without process there are no events. And what wealth usually will elude people who are preoccupied by events of wealth rather than the process of building wealth. And what MJ talks about is the roadmaps. The three different roadmaps he talks about are the sidewalk and the slow lane and the fast lane. And we'll go into a lot of details as we go through the book. And it's a brilliant analogy just to explain what's going on in this book. And one of the fun ideas I like about it is the idea of paying tolls, which is idea of taking risks and making sacrifices and going through hardships, which is the idea of paying toll as you go on your road to wealth. A lot of people assume that you don't need to do these things. You don't need to take risks. You don't need to make sacrifices. You don't need to go through hardships in order to create wealth. And that is absolutely not the truth at all. If you resist the toll, wealth will resist you. If you resist the risks and the sacrifices and the hardships, wealth will resist you. And moving on to the roadmaps to wealth, we'll get into a lot of details, but the key understanding here is the sidewalk is what is for the poor people. It's what poor people end up doing. The slow lane is the lane of mediocrity, which is what people who retire from jobs after 40 years of working, they end up. And fast lane is the real lane to real wealth. And having said that, let's jump right into more details on these different roadmaps to wealth. The first roadmap that we talked about was the sidewalk, or the roadmap of the poor. And to get into more detail, these are the sidewalk roadmap are the people who are living beyond their means. They are living for pleasure today rather than for security tomorrow. And it's all about right now, in the moment. Let's enjoy. And there's no plan, no savings, and they're spending more than they're earning. These are the sidewalk roadmap people. These are destined to be poor. Poorness is the final destination of a sidewalk roadmap. And the idea of wealth toxification is what MJ talks about, which is basically you have more than you can afford. You are destroying your wealth. You have toxified your wealth. And what MJ, again, a brilliant concept here, he talks about, again, going back to the idea of process versus events. Process is what creates events, and the outside world sees it as luck, but it's actually process. Luck is a product of acting on the process every day, day in and day out, and doing the hard work and being there and going after every opportunity you have. But the problem is that sidewalkers, people on the sidewalk, people on this lane to poor, the end poor goal, they hate process. They want events. They do not want process. So you have to get this correct, that adherence to process is the only way to improve your probability of success. Not some random event, not some luck or some chance. It's only adherence to process which will allow you to have a higher probability of success. And then what MJ talks about is lacking accountability. What most people do when they're on the sidewalk, or the ones who are destined for poorness, they do not take accountability. They do not own their mistakes, their failures, or their triumphs. So you have to take responsibility and stop being a victim. That's when you can start getting out of the sidewalk, or the end destination of being a of poorness. The second lane, or the other lane that MJ talks about, is mediocrity, or the slow lane, which is very common, very prevalent in society today. And that is the idea of you sell off today in hopes of a glorious future tomorrow. You work yourself to death for the next 40 years, all the way to retirement till you're 65, and you save up all the money in the hopes that when you're 65 you will have your golden years and you will get to enjoy the money. But your job, it's a domestication. You have been domesticated. When you have a job, you have very limited leverage because you cannot afford time, and you have very limited control on your own future. The tax, of course, is a big deal, and the government will get most of your money in taxes. So in effect, you are losing a lot of money as a result of being in the slow lane, in the lane towards mediocrity. Now, what MJ is trying to explain is that why people aren't rich is because in order to become rich, we need two things. We need control and we need leverage. And unfortunately, in a job, which is the slow lane way of doing things, you don't really have control and you don't have no leverage at all because of the time you get paid for the time that you put in. So what's really happening is no, the slow lane is just a plan of long-term hope, hoping that your 401k does not crash, hoping that you will have a job at 65, hoping that you will be healthy at 65. All those things. It's a plan of hope rather than a plan of action and ownership. One of the things that the slow lane people need to understand is that education begins after college, after graduation, after you graduate um, from formal education. That's when you need to really start educating yourself and go on the fast lane. That's how you get on the fast lane. Now, again, as we talked about, the slow lane is the game of hope because you don't know whether you'll survive it. And you really can't win the money game by playing on defense, which is what you end up doing when you're playing in the slow lane, because you're saving up this money, hoping that the market will not crash, and you're not really signed up, you're not really leveraging your assets, you're not really playing for explosive growth. So, just to clarify, now that we have come so far, we have first understood the sidewalk or the lane that's going to take us to the end destination of poorness, or the mediocrity lane, which is the slow lane. There's a there are certain distinct differences between slow lane and fast lane. In the slow lane, we trade time for money, which is a job. But in the fast lane, you leverage your time through a business. In the slow lane, you are cheap with money because you have to save money because your time is money at that point. But in fast lane, you're cheap with time because time is your greatest asset. You'd much rather have time than you try to save a penny here or a penny there. Having said that, let's talk more now about the fast lane, the wealth building lane. And what the fast lane is, it's marked by controllable, unlimited leverage. And time is the most important asset you have, which is far exceeds the money assets that we think. When you are in slow lane, you think money is the key asset. But in fast lane, you have to start thinking of time as the key asset. What also MJ talks about is the idea that it's possible to get rich quick. It's possible, but it has to be preceded by process, by effort, by taking risks, by taking chances, by paying the tolls, as he put it early on. So it is possible to get rich fast, but it is not possible to get rich easy. It is simple, but it's not easy. And the fast lane is actually a business. It's a business system, while the slow lane is actually just a job. And that's the key distinction. So, understanding the playbook for wealth, you have to get out of the consumer mindset and start getting into the producer mindset. And instead of buying from ads on TV, you actually sell ads, sell products on TV. Or instead of taking a job, you hire for jobs. You become a producer rather than a consumer. And what MJ talks about is how the rich really get rich, which is through appreciable assets. And liquidation events are basically when you have created an asset that pays you over and over again. At some point, someone would like to buy you out, or you have a public offering. That's when you get liquidated. So again, these are all preceded by process. By process. And one of the key ideas for wealth in the fast lane is to divorce your wealth from time. Divorce yourself from the slow lane idea that time, the transaction of money and time. Stop thinking in terms of saving pennies here and there in order rather than saving your time. Because business systems, and that is why you have to start thinking of business systems, because business systems break the bounds between your time for your money. And Again, the wealth in fast lane is always about living below your means. You have to live below your means. No matter how rich you get, no matter how wealthy you get, you always live below your means. And a dollar saved is every time going to be something that's going to be fighting for you in the long term. So you have to save and you have to live below your means. And again, MJ talks about something very simple, which is the idea, the law of affection. The law of affection, which is how many people are you going to affect? How big is your scale of effect? How big, how, what is the magnitude of the number of people you will affect? Or maybe you'll affect not a whole lot of people, but a few people in a huge way. And that is what is going to make you real wealth. So always think about it. What is the scale of your impact, and what's the magnitude of your impact of the business that you are planning to go into? And now MJ talks about the vehicle of wealth, which is basically you. He talks about first we have to start by owning ourselves, which is having a corporate structure in place so that we own the business rather than, and we pay ourselves first rather than pay ourselves last after the government and the retirements take the money away. And a beautiful analogy that MJ uses here is in the life steering wheel, which he says the steering wheel is basically our choices, and just a small shift in the steering wheel can lead us to either the freedom, the highway, the fastest lane, or into a brick wall, or off the freeway into the slow lane. So we have to be very careful of the choices that we make in our lives, because small tiny choices will affect our results years and years and years out in the future. So both success and failure come from small choices that are made every day that accumulate over time. It's very similar to the concept that Jim Rohn talks about, which is success is done every day and failure is done every day as well. You cannot just choose to be successful one day and then stop doing the things that you're supposed to do. You have to make choice every day, and that is the most powerful control mechanism you have. If you make the right choices every day, then these choices will create processes, and the processes will make you rich. So success is not just one choice, and neither is failure. Failure is not one choice either. Success is one choice compounded over again and again and again. Hundreds of choices strung together. And so is failure. Hundreds of choices, wrong choices strung together. And then he talks about the windshield, which is just how do we make better choices, and being able to always have the right ways of doing these. And he goes into a lot of detail into a couple of different methodologies for making the right choices, to make sure that you're clear on the windshield so you can make the right choices. And one of the methods he talks about is worst case consequence analysis, and the other one is weighted average decision matrix. I highly recommend you get the book, look into it, get into the details of it. It's a beautiful concept to understand. Simple, very simple, but really effective. And then he also talks about it's a funny analogy, but he says there will be people who will be trying to pull you back and trying to tell you negative things, that you cannot do this, or you can only do so much. But you have to be very cognizant of the people you have in your life, because they can either pull you back, or they can either push you back or really pull you forward. So be very careful of the people you have in your life. And then he talks about time. Basically, again, going back to the idea, in fast lane, you have to value your time over pinching pennies. You have to value your time, and if you value your time poorly, you will be poor. If you value your time poorly, you will be poor. Fast laners are frugal with time, while slow laners are frugal with money. Fast laners are frugal with time, while slow laners are frugal with money. I see this again and again. I see this daily. every day, all the time. And then MG talks about changing the oil, which basically means educating ourselves, not just stopping at graduation, but continuing to educate ourselves all our lives to be able to never go stale, always refreshing ourselves, always changing that oil, always getting the clean engine, the clean brain, refreshing our education, getting more and cleaner, getting the ideas in our head. And then he talks about commitment, basically hitting the red line, where he says if interest is first gear, then commitment is red line. And it is really important that we commit ourselves fully. If interest is quitting after the second failure, commitment is continuing after the 100th failure. And one of the golden lines he said in the book, which is, if you avoid failure, you will also avoid success. If you avoid failure, you will also avoid success. This is brilliant. If you avoid failure, you will also avoid success. I cannot repeat this line enough times, but it's so beautiful. It almost encompasses some of the mysteries of life right there. If we avoid failure in any aspect of life, we also avoid success. And what MJ is coming at is the idea that the timing will never be perfect, and we cannot wait. We just have to attack. We have to go after it. It's the same thing as what Napoleon Hill talks about in Think and Grow Rich, where he says, you can do all the planning you want, but you got to go for it. You got to attack. You cannot stop. You cannot just wait for an opportunity. And the same thing that actually Napoleon Bonaparte said in during his reign. He said, circumstances, I make circumstances. I will not wait for circumstances to be right. I will go for it. I will attack now. So it is crucial for us to never wait for the timing to be perfect. Someday never comes. Someday never comes. Someday is a dangerous and paralyzing proposition. We got to do it right now. We got to do it today. We got to attack today. Now, the roads to wealth. What MJ is talking about is basically trying to explain what kind of business you want to get into. And he gets into the 5 commandments, which is the need, the entry, the control, the scale, and time. In terms of need, he says you want to focus on solving others' needs. And the amount of money you will make in your life will be a reflection of the value you add to others. The other thing he talks about is entry barriers. You don't want to get into a business where entry barriers are minimum. If they are, then you have to be exceptional. And then control. You want to control your system and every aspect of it. You want to, as much as possible, control your system. And then you want to be able to have that scale, because without scale, without leverage, you cannot create wealth exponentially. And then it's about time. You cannot have a business that's tied to your time, because as soon as you do that, it's a job. A business that earns income exclusive of your time, now that meets the commandment of time. Again, so 5 commandments when it comes to right roads, right kinds of businesses. Must solve some important needs, must not have very easy barriers to entry, must allow you a lot of control, must be scalable, must have a lot of leverage, and must not tie you up in terms of time. Having said that, now what MJ is saying is that right now, in this age that we are, there are a few avenues that can be used in terms of business, which is one of which he says is internet, another one is innovation, and the third one is intentional iteration, where you take a business and you keep on improving it and improving it and improving it. So it is up to us to find the open road, but the key is to always understand that the success in Fastlane does not lie in ideas. It lies in execution. It's the same concept that we talked about in The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, where he says that 5% of success in any business venture comes from the initial idea. The remaining 95% comes from execution and pivoting and persevering and just going with it and trying again and again and again until you succeed. So the speed of execution, the speed of iteration, the speed of uh, going after it and changing as you see fit is what will create success for you. Um, and and then MJ talks about giving the road a destination. Simple concept, which is basically identifying what is that you're after, getting the right targets in mind, and then making it very real, small chunking the goals and working towards them. Don't think of a mountain, just start with the next step and the next step and the next step. Now, how do you accelerate wealth? Again, the same concept as what we talked about earlier, which is the speed of success will always lie in execution. It's not in ideas. Ideas are pawns, while execution is king. Execution is king. Ideas have speed. Ideas have potential speed, but execution is the real speed. And again, MJ talks about the idea that it's not about the planning, it's not about the big idea, it's all in execution. And as you start the business, as you go through your execution, you will start to unearth things. You will come across barriers, you'll come across roadblocks, and you'll have to change directions. But that is part of business. That is exactly what Napoleon Hill says. That's exactly what Eric Ries says in the Lean Startup. And there are so many other books that talk about very similar concepts, which is don't worry about the plan. It will start with a plan, but then as you go, you keep on executing and you keep on iterating and you keep on changing. The other concept that MJ Demarco is talking about in this book is that the customers is the pedestrians who will make you rich. It's important to provide excellent customer service and to be able to satisfy the customers the best you can. And then he talks about how people are very important in this whole business affair, and it is really important for us to keep the right people, because a company is only as good as the people it keeps, and the business partnership is like a marriage. This goes back to the concept that we've studied in Good to Great, where Jim Collins talks about how it's really critical. The first discipline is the discipline of people, having the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus. So understanding the concept and going with it. And another thing that MJ talks about is using the competition to exploit their weakness, to understand their weakness and then to exploit it. And don't just get commoditized. Become someone's savior. Do something new, something different. And usually you can use your competition to exploit their weaknesses, which is one of the easiest ways to do it, to study the competition and then exploit the weaknesses that they have. Building brands, not businesses. That's basically coming down to developing your unique selling proposition and rising above the noise. In some ways, being able to rise above the dean of rise above what everyone else is doing. Various ways to do it. What MJ is saying is you can either polarize, you can arouse emotions, you can be risque, you can encourage interaction, you can be unconventional. Do something to be able to rise above the noise. And finally, one of the big concepts again is choose monogamy over polygamy, which basically means don't try to start and run 1,000 different businesses. Focus on one, dig into it, do as much as you can, get it down to really the best you can, and then once you have it working, maybe you can move on to the next one. But you really got to focus on one thing at a time. Focus on one thing at a time. Having said that, let us review the big ideas of this book again. A phenomenal book. First thing, process over events. Understanding that process is what creates wealth, not events. Most people think events create wealth, but it's not true. Process is what creates wealth. The next thing is being frugal with your time, not money. Most slow laners, and most people on the pedestrian on the sidewalk are frugal with money, but they're not frugal with time. But time is the greatest asset. And the other thing is the law of effect, which is in order to make a lot of money, we must serve a lot of people in scale or a few in magnitude. The other thing that's a big idea here is being 100% committed. Not 99%, not 98%, not 99.9% either. You have to be 100% committed in order to get to where you want to go in terms of a wealth destination. If you are not fully committed, you will not be able to get it done. And then the other idea is timing is never perfect. Timing is never perfect. You will never have the right time. You have to go after the opportunity right then and there, because waiting will empower mediocrity. And then execution is king. Ideas are pawns. Don't get seduced by new ideas. Start executing, start rolling. And as you execute, you'll learn, you'll iterate, and you'll get better. And the last idea is focus on one thing at a time. Do not go for polygamy, go for monogamy. Monogamy is the way to go. So there it is. Awesome book. Highly recommend you get it. Has brilliant stories, brilliant analogies. There is so much wisdom in this book. Highly recommend The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ Demarco.